I'm Elena, your host for today's lesson. And today we are covering a shift in American English that has happened so quickly and so completely that most English courses have not caught up to it at all. 10 years ago, if an American was upset with you, they might say, "You hurt my feelings." Today, they are far more likely to say, "That really doesn't feel good for me, and I need to name that." 10 years ago, a friend canceling plans might just say, "Sorry, can't make it." Today, they might say, "I'm protecting my energy this weekend, so I'm going to sit this one out." This is not a small vocabulary trend. This is an entire cultural transformation in how Americans talk about their inner lives. Therapy, once a private, clinical experience, has become so mainstream in the United States that its vocabulary has completely escaped the therapy room. It now lives in text messages, in office meetings, in family arguments, in dating profiles, in breakup conversations, in TikTok captions. Words like boundaries, trauma, trigger, holding space, and doing the work are no longer specialist terms. They are now the default vocabulary an enormous number of Americans, especially under 40, use to describe everything from a minor annoyance to a genuine life crisis. And here is the challenge for you as a learner. This vocabulary sounds gentle, even soft, but it is often being used to do something very direct, to set a limit, to end a relationship, to say no, to describe someone else's behavior critically without ever raising your voice. If you do not understand this code, you will completely misread what is actually happening in a huge number of modern American conversations. Today, we are decoding it completely. 6 categories, 25 phrases each, 150 essential pieces of the modern American emotional vocabulary. For every phrase, I will give you the literal meaning, where it actually came from, how it is used in real conversation, and what it truly signals underneath the softness. Say every example out loud after me. Let us begin. Category 1, boundaries, the most powerful word in modern American English. If you learn only one word from this entire lesson, make it this one. Boundaries has become the single most important word in how Americans discuss relationships, work, and self-protection. Once you understand it, an enormous amount of modern American conversation suddenly makes sense. Phrase 1. That's a boundary for me. Meaning, a firm personal limit that the speaker is stating as non-negotiable. Context: declining a request or behavior that crosses a personal limit. Example: I love hanging out, but showing up unannounced is a boundary for me. Repeat: that's a boundary for me. Phrase 2. I need to set a boundary here. Meaning, announcing that a limit is about to be established, usually in response to repeated behavior. Context: a recurring issue that the speaker has decided to address directly. Example: I need to set a boundary here. I can't answer work emails after 6. Repeat: I need to set a boundary here. Phrase 3. I'm working on my boundaries. Meaning, actively developing the ability to say no or protect personal limits, often mentioned as ongoing self-improvement. Context: explaining a personal growth process, often in the context of a past pattern of overgiving. Example: I used to say yes to everything. I'm really working on my boundaries this year. Repeat: I'm working on my boundaries. Phrase 4. That crosses a line for me. Meaning, a behavior has gone beyond an acceptable limit, functioning as a serious warning. Context: addressing a specific incident that violated a personal boundary. Example: reading my texts without asking crosses a line for me. Repeat: that crosses a line for me. Phrase 5. I have to protect my boundaries. Meaning, actively defending a limit against pressure to abandon it. Context: resisting pushback after stating a boundary. Example: I know you're disappointed, but I have to protect my boundaries here. Repeat: I have to protect my boundaries. Phrase 6. This isn't a boundary I'm willing to compromise on. Meaning, a firm, non-negotiable limit, explicitly stated as unmovable. Context: responding to continued pressure or negotiation. Example: I hear you, but this isn't a boundary I'm willing to compromise on. Repeat: this isn't a boundary I'm willing to compromise on. Phrase 7. I respect your boundary, but, meaning, an acknowledgement of someone else's limit, often used before gently pushing back anyway. Context: responding to someone else's stated limit. Example: I respect your boundary, but can we at least talk about why? Repeat: I respect your boundary, but. Phrase 8. You're allowed to have boundaries with family too. Meaning, a statement affirming that limits apply even to close, obligatory relationships. Context: discussing difficult family dynamics or expectations. Example: it's hard, but you're allowed to have boundaries with family too. Repeat: you're allowed to have boundaries with family too. Phrase 9. I don't think that boundary is healthy. Meaning, a critical assessment that someone's limit is excessive or harmful, rather than protective. Context: discussing a friend's or partner's behavior with concern. Example: cutting off everyone who disagrees with you? I don't think that boundary is healthy. Repeat: I don't think that boundary is healthy. Phrase 10. That's outside my boundaries right now. Meaning, a temporary situational limit, implying it could change under different circumstances. Context: declining something specifically because of current capacity, not as a permanent rule. Example: I can't take on extra shifts this month. That's outside my boundaries right now. Repeat: that's outside my boundaries right now. Phrase 11. I need firmer boundaries with him. Meaning, a realization that existing limits with someone are not being respected and need strengthening. Context: reflecting on a relationship where limits are regularly ignored. Example: every time I say I'm busy, he still calls 10 times. I need firmer boundaries with him. Repeat: I need firmer boundaries with him. Phrase 12. Boundaries aren't punishments. Meaning, a clarifying statement often used to explain that a limit isn't meant as retaliation. Context: explaining a boundary to someone who feels rejected by it. Example, I'm not trying to hurt you. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're just limits. Repeat. Boundaries aren't punishments. Phrase 13. I'm allowed to change my boundaries. Meaning, an assertion that personal limits can evolve over time and don't need to remain fixed. Context. Explaining why a previously accepted behavior is no longer acceptable. Example, I used to be okay with that, but I'm allowed to change my boundaries. Repeat, I'm allowed to change my boundaries. Phrase 14, that's a hard boundary. Meaning, an especially firm, non-negotiable limit, distinguished from a softer preference. Context, clarifying the seriousness of a specific limit. Example, being spoken to like that in front of others is a hard boundary for me. Repeat, that's a hard boundary. Phrase 15, I need you to respect this boundary. Meaning, a direct request for compliance with a previously stated limit. Context, addressing continued pressure after a boundary has already been communicated. Example, I've said this before. I need you to respect this boundary. Repeat, I need you to respect this boundary. Phrase 16, setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. Meaning, a reframing statement that presents limit setting as healthy rather than selfish. Context, justifying a decision to establish a limit, often to oneself or a supportive listener. Example, it felt uncomfortable at first, but setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. Repeat, setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. Phrase 17, I let that boundary slip. Meaning, acknowledging a failure to maintain a previously established personal limit. Context, reflecting on a situation where an old, unwanted pattern returned. Example, I let that boundary slip and answered work calls on vacation again. Repeat, I let that boundary slip. Phrase 18, that's not a boundary, that's an ultimatum. Meaning, a critical distinction pointing out that something framed as self-protective is actually a demand or threat. Context, challenging someone's use of the word boundary in an argument. Example, telling me to choose between you and my job isn't a boundary. That's an ultimatum. Repeat, that's not a boundary. That's an ultimatum. Phrase 19, I'm still figuring out my boundaries. Meaning, an honest admission that limit setting is an ongoing, unfinished process. Context, explaining inconsistency or uncertainty in personal limits. Example, I said yes again, even though I didn't want to. I'm still figuring out my boundaries. Repeat, I'm still figuring out my boundaries. Phrase 20, boundaries go both ways. Meaning, a statement asserting that limit setting applies mutually, not just to one person in a relationship. Context, responding to someone who sets limits for others but resists having limits set on them. Example, you set boundaries with me all the time. Boundaries go both ways. Repeat, boundaries go both ways. Phrase 21, I have to enforce this boundary. Meaning, taking active steps to make sure a stated limit is respected, beyond just announcing it. Context: a boundary that has already been ignored once. Example: I told you I needed quiet after 9, and I have to enforce this boundary now. Repeat: I have to enforce this boundary. Phrase 22. That request violates a boundary I already set. Meaning: a formal, clear statement identifying a specific instance of a limit being crossed. Context: pointing out a repeated violation, often in a workplace or family setting. Example: asking me to work this weekend violates a boundary I already set. Repeat: that request violates a boundary I already set. Phrase 23. I appreciate you asking, but that's a boundary. Meaning: a polite decline that closes off further negotiation by invoking the word directly. Context: turning down a request while signaling it is non-negotiable. Example: I appreciate you asking, but lending money is a boundary for me. Repeat: I appreciate you asking, but that's a boundary. Phrase 24. My therapist and I have been working on this exact boundary. Meaning: a phrase that adds professional credibility and seriousness to a personal limit. Context: explaining the depth of thought behind a specific boundary. Example: my therapist and I have been working on this exact boundary, actually. Repeat: my therapist and I have been working on this exact boundary. Phrase 25. I need to hold this boundary, even if it's uncomfortable. Meaning: a statement of resolve to maintain a limit despite the emotional difficulty of doing so. Context: reaffirming a boundary under pressure or guilt. Example: I know it's hard to hear, but I need to hold this boundary, even if it's uncomfortable. Repeat: I need to hold this boundary, even if it's uncomfortable. Category 2. Trauma, triggers, and trigger warnings. The language of emotional injury. This vocabulary originated in clinical psychology, describing serious psychological injury. In everyday American speech, it now describes everything from genuine trauma to minor discomfort. Understanding both the clinical and casual uses is essential. Phrase 26. That's really triggering for me. Meaning: something has provoked a strong emotional or psychological reaction connected to past experience. Context: explaining a reaction to a specific topic, image, or situation. Example: can we talk about something else? That topic is really triggering for me. Repeat: that's really triggering for me. Phrase 27. I have some trauma around that. Meaning: a past painful experience continues to affect the speaker's reaction to a related situation. Context: explaining a strong emotional response to something seemingly minor. Example: I have some trauma around being late, so please text me if you're running behind. Repeat: I have some trauma around that. Phrase 28. That's not my trauma to fix. Meaning: a statement declining responsibility for healing or managing someone else's past pain. Context: setting a limit in a relationship where one person's unresolved issues affect the other. Example: I care about you, but that's not my trauma to fix. Repeat: that's not my trauma to fix. Phrase 29. trigger warning, but. Meaning, a verbal alert given before discussing potentially distressing content. Context, preparing a listener before raising a sensitive topic. Example, trigger warning, but I want to talk about the accident for a second. Repeat, trigger warning, but. Phrase 30, I'm doing trauma work right now. Meaning, actively engaged in therapy or self-reflection focused on processing past painful experiences. Context, explaining current emotional or behavioral changes. Example, I've been a little different lately. I'm doing trauma work right now. Repeat, I'm doing trauma work right now. Phrase 31, that comment really activated something in me. Meaning, a specific remark provoked an unexpectedly strong emotional response tied to a deeper issue. Context, explaining an intense reaction to something that seems small on the surface. Example, I know it was a small comment, but it really activated something in me. Repeat, that comment really activated something in me. Phrase 32, I'm trying not to let my trauma response take over. Meaning, consciously working to manage an automatic, disproportionate reaction rooted in past experience. Context, describing an internal effort to stay calm despite feeling triggered. Example, I felt myself getting defensive, but I'm trying not to let my trauma response take over. Repeat, I'm trying not to let my trauma response take over. Phrase 33, that's a trauma bond, not love. Meaning, a critical distinction, describing an unhealthy attachment formed through cycles of harm and relief, rather than genuine affection. Context, discussing a difficult or toxic relationship. Example, the way you keep going back after he apologizes, that's a trauma bond, not love. Repeat, that's a trauma bond, not love. Phrase 34, I need to name my triggers. Meaning, the process of identifying specific situations or topics that provoke a strong emotional reaction. Context, discussing self-awareness work, often as part of therapy. Example, my therapist told me I need to name my triggers so I can prepare for them. Repeat, I need to name my triggers. Phrase 35, that's a survival response, not who I really am. Meaning, a behavior driven by past protective instincts, distinguished from the speaker's genuine character. Context, explaining a reaction that felt out of proportion or character. Example, I know I snapped at you. That's a survival response, not who I really am. Repeat, that's a survival response, not who I really am. Phrase 36, I'm hyper-vigilant about that. Meaning, an excessive, exhausting state of alertness around a specific concern, often rooted in past experience. Context, explaining a persistent, anxious behavior pattern. Example, I'm hyper-vigilant about being ignored, so silence really stresses me out. Repeat, I'm hyper-vigilant about that. Phrase 37, that's a lot to unpack. Meaning, a situation contains layered emotional complexity requiring significant reflection. Context, responding to a heavy or complicated personal disclosure. Example, you just found out both things at once? That's a lot to unpack. Repeat, that's a lot to unpack. Phrase 38. I don't have the capacity to hold that right now. Meaning, the speaker lacks the emotional resources to process or support something at this moment. Context: declining to engage with someone else's heavy emotional disclosure. Example: I care about you, but I don't have the capacity to hold that right now. Repeat: I don't have the capacity to hold that right now. Phrase 39. That's my nervous system reacting, not the actual situation. Meaning, a physiological, automatic stress response distinguished from an accurate read of present danger. Context: explaining a disproportionate physical or emotional reaction. Example: I know logically I'm safe, but that's my nervous system reacting, not the actual situation. Repeat: that's my nervous system reacting, not the actual situation. Phrase 40. I need to regulate before we talk about this. Meaning, a request for time to calm an intense emotional or physiological state before engaging in discussion. Context: pausing a difficult conversation to manage overwhelming feelings. Example: I'm too worked up right now. I need to regulate before we talk about this. Repeat: I need to regulate before we talk about this. Phrase 41. That's an old wound getting poked. Meaning, a current situation has reopened feelings connected to unresolved past pain. Context: explaining why a seemingly small comment provoked a large reaction. Example: it's not really about the dishes. That's an old wound getting poked. Repeat: that's an old wound getting poked. Phrase 42. I'm learning to sit with discomfort instead of reacting. Meaning, a conscious practice of tolerating difficult emotions rather than immediately acting to escape them. Context: describing personal growth in emotional regulation. Example: my first instinct was to leave the room, but I'm learning to sit with discomfort instead of reacting. Repeat: I'm learning to sit with discomfort instead of reacting. Phrase 43. That's a fear response talking. Meaning, a reaction driven by anxiety rather than a rational assessment of the current situation. Context: identifying the emotional root of a defensive or avoidant behavior. Example: I know I'm being distant. That's a fear response talking. Repeat: that's a fear response talking. Phrase 44. I need to process this before I respond. Meaning, a request for time before reacting to emotionally significant information. Context: delaying a response to give oneself space to think and feel. Example: that's really big news. I need to process this before I respond. Repeat: I need to process this before I respond. Phrase 45. I don't want to spiral about it. Meaning, a desire to avoid a downward pattern of escalating negative thoughts. Context: discussing a stressful situation while trying to stay emotionally grounded. Example: I could really spiral about this, but I'm trying to just stay present. Repeat: I don't want to spiral about it. Phrase 46. That touched a nerve. Meaning, a comment or situation caused a sudden, sharp emotional reaction, often revealing an underlying sensitivity. Context: Acknowledging a strong reaction to something someone said. Example, I didn't mean to snap. That just touched a nerve. Repeat, that touched a nerve. Phrase 47, I'm not in a triggered state right now, so I can talk about this calmly. Meaning, a statement clarifying emotional readiness to engage in a potentially sensitive conversation. Context, reassuring someone before broaching a difficult topic. Example, I've had time to think, and I'm not in a triggered state right now, so I can talk about this calmly. Repeat, I'm not in a triggered state right now, so I can talk about this calmly. Phrase 48, that's generational trauma showing up. Meaning, a pattern of behavior attributed to inherited family or cultural patterns of past harm. Context, discussing a recurring family dynamic or personal behavior pattern. Example, the way we avoid conflict in this family, that's generational trauma showing up. Repeat, that's generational trauma showing up. Phrase 49, I recognize that pattern from my past. Meaning, self-aware acknowledgement that a current reaction mirrors an old, familiar emotional pattern. Context, reflecting on a repeated behavior or relationship dynamic. Example, I keep picking partners who are emotionally unavailable. I recognize that pattern from my past. Repeat, I recognize that pattern from my past. Phrase 50, I'm choosing to break the cycle. Meaning, a deliberate decision to act differently than an inherited or repeated harmful pattern. Context, describing an active effort toward personal change. Example, my family always shouted during arguments, but I'm choosing to break the cycle. Repeat, I'm choosing to break the cycle. Category 3, holding space and emotional labor. The vocabulary of support and its limits. These phrases describe the work of emotionally supporting others and, increasingly, the limits people place on how much of that work they're willing to do. This category reveals a very modern American tension between compassion and self-protection. Phrase 51, I'm holding space for you right now. Meaning, being fully present and emotionally available for someone without judgment or trying to fix the situation. Context, supporting someone through a difficult moment. Example, you don't have to explain everything. I'm just holding space for you right now. Repeat, I'm holding space for you right now. Phrase 52, I can't hold space for that today. Meaning, a decline to provide emotional support at this specific moment due to a lack of capacity. Context, setting a limit on emotional availability. Example, I really care about you, but I can't hold space for that today. Repeat, I can't hold space for that today. Phrase 53, that's a lot of emotional labor. Meaning, the significant, often invisible effort required to manage or support others' feelings. Context, describing the exhausting nature of ongoing caretaking, often in relationships or workplaces. Example, constantly reassuring him about the relationship is a lot of emotional labor. Repeat, that's a lot of emotional labor. Phrase 54, I'm not your emotional support system. Meaning, a firm statement declining to be the primary source of someone else's emotional support. Context, setting a limit with a friend, partner, or family member who relies heavily on you. Example, I love you, but I'm not your emotional support system. You need a therapist too. Repeat, I'm not your emotional support system. Phrase 55. I need reciprocity in this friendship, meaning a request that emotional support be mutual rather than flowing entirely in one direction. Context. Addressing an imbalance in a close relationship. Example, I've been there for you a lot lately. I need reciprocity in this friendship. Repeat, I need reciprocity in this friendship. Phrase 56. That's not my responsibility to manage. Meaning, a refusal to take ownership of someone else's emotional state or reaction. Context. Declining to be blamed or held accountable for another person's feelings. Example, I understand you're upset, but that's not my responsibility to manage. Repeat, that's not my responsibility to manage. Phrase 57. I'm pouring from an empty cup. Meaning, giving emotional support to others despite having no personal reserves left. Context. Describing burnout from continuous caretaking. Example, I keep showing up for everyone else, but I'm pouring from an empty cup. Repeat, I'm pouring from an empty cup. Phrase 58. I need someone to hold space for me for once. Meaning, a request to receive emotional support rather than always providing it. Context. Expressing exhaustion from being the consistent emotional caretaker in a relationship. Example, I always listen to everyone else's problems. I need someone to hold space for me for once. Repeat, I need someone to hold space for me for once. Phrase 59. That's emotionally exhausting for me. Meaning, a direct statement of fatigue caused by managing an emotionally demanding situation or person. Context. Explaining the toll of a specific relationship or recurring dynamic. Example, I love her, but constantly managing her moods is emotionally exhausting for me. Repeat, that's emotionally exhausting for me. Phrase 60. I can listen, but I'm not equipped to fix this. Meaning, an offer of support paired with a clear limit on the type of help being provided. Context. Supporting someone through a serious issue while declining a problem-solving role. Example, I can listen, but I'm not equipped to fix this. Have you thought about talking to someone professional? Repeat, I can listen, but I'm not equipped to fix this. Phrase 61. I don't have the bandwidth for that conversation right now. Meaning, a lack of current emotional or mental capacity to engage in a demanding discussion. Context. Declining a heavy conversation due to being overwhelmed. Example, I want to be there for you, but I don't have the bandwidth for that conversation right now. Repeat, I don't have the bandwidth for that conversation right now. Phrase 62. I'm carrying a lot right now, so I can't take on more. Meaning, an honest statement of personal emotional load used to justify declining to help. Context. Turning down a request for support while explaining the reasoning. Example, I'm carrying a lot right now, so I can't take on more, even though I wish I could. Repeat, I'm carrying a lot right now, so I can't take on more. Phrase 63. Thank you for holding that with me. Meaning, Gratitude expressed for someone's emotional presence and support during a difficult time. Context: acknowledging support received from a friend, partner, or family member. Example: that conversation was really hard. Thank you for holding that with me. Repeat: thank you for holding that with me. Phrase 64. I need to check in with myself before I check in with you. Meaning, prioritizing self-assessment before offering support to someone else. Context: delaying a supportive response to first process one's own emotional state. Example: I want to give you a real answer, so let me check in with myself before I check in with you. Repeat: I need to check in with myself before I check in with you. Phrase 65. That's a lot to carry alone. Meaning, an empathetic acknowledgement of someone else's emotional burden. Context: responding to someone describing a heavy personal situation. Example: you've been dealing with this for months without telling anyone. That's a lot to carry alone. Repeat: that's a lot to carry alone. Phrase 66. I'm here for you, but I also need to protect my own peace. Meaning, a statement combining an offer of support with a clear limit on how much emotional strain will be accepted. Context: supporting someone while establishing a limit to prevent burnout. Example: I'm here for you, but I also need to protect my own peace, so let's set a time limit on venting. Repeat: I'm here for you, but I also need to protect my own peace. Phrase 67. I need to sit with my own feelings before I can support yours. Meaning, a request to attend to personal emotional needs before offering support to someone else. Context: recognizing personal limits before engaging in an emotionally demanding interaction. Example: I'm still processing my own week, so I need to sit with my own feelings before I can support yours. Repeat: I need to sit with my own feelings before I can support yours. Phrase 68. I felt unseen in that conversation. Meaning, a feeling of not being genuinely acknowledged or understood during an interaction. Context: describing dissatisfaction with how a conversation went, particularly around emotional expression. Example: I brought up something important and you changed the subject. I felt unseen in that conversation. Repeat: I felt unseen in that conversation. Phrase 69. I need you to just listen, not fix. Meaning, a request for pure emotional presence rather than practical problem solving. Context: clarifying the type of support desired before venting. Example: I don't need advice right now. I need you to just listen, not fix. Repeat: I need you to just listen, not fix. Phrase 70. That's a lot of unpaid emotional labor. Meaning, a critique of the invisible, uncompensated effort of caretaking, often within relationships or families. Context: discussing an unequal distribution of emotional support responsibilities. Example: being the one who remembers everyone's birthdays and manages everyone's moods. That's a lot of unpaid emotional labor. Repeat: that's a lot of unpaid emotional labor. Phrase 71. I'm withdrawing my emotional labor from this relationship. Meaning, a deliberate decision to stop providing emotional support in a relationship, often as a boundary. Context. A significant, often final statement about a draining relationship dynamic. Example. After everything that's happened, I'm withdrawing my emotional labor from this relationship. Repeat. I'm withdrawing my emotional labor from this relationship. Phrase 72. I need reassurance right now. Meaning, a direct, honest request for comforting words or affirmation. Context. Explicitly naming an emotional need rather than hoping it's noticed. Example. I know this sounds needy, but I need reassurance right now. Repeat. I need reassurance right now. Phrase 73. I'm doing the emotional heavy lifting in this relationship. Meaning, a complaint that one person is disproportionately responsible for the relationship's emotional maintenance. Context. Addressing an imbalance with a partner or close friend. Example. I'm always the one checking in first. I'm doing the emotional heavy lifting in this relationship. Repeat. I'm doing the emotional heavy lifting in this relationship. Phrase 74. I appreciate you holding space, but I need to hold my own right now. Meaning, a polite decline of offered support, asserting independence in processing one's own feelings. Context. Turning down support while acknowledging the kind intention behind it. Example. I appreciate you holding space, but I need to hold my own right now. Repeat. I appreciate you holding space, but I need to hold my own right now. Phrase 75. I need to fill my own cup before I can give to anyone else. Meaning, prioritizing personal well-being and recovery before resuming a caretaking role. Context. Explaining a period of reduced availability to support others. Example. I've been so depleted lately. I need to fill my own cup before I can give to anyone else. Repeat. I need to fill my own cup before I can give to anyone else. Category 4. Toxic, gaslighting, and red flags. The vocabulary of naming harm. This is the sharpest, most critical branch of therapy speak. Vocabulary used to identify, label, and often end relationships and dynamics deemed harmful. These words carry serious weight in modern American conversation and are frequently misapplied, which is exactly why understanding them precisely matters. Phrase 76. That's a red flag for me. Meaning, a specific behavior or comment that signals a potential serious problem in a person or relationship. Context. Identifying a warning sign, often early in a relationship or friendship. Example. He canceled 3 times in the first week. That's a red flag for me. Repeat. That's a red flag for me. Phrase 77. I felt gaslit in that conversation. Meaning, a feeling that someone manipulated the speaker into doubting their own memory, perception, or judgment. Context. Describing a conversation where the speaker's reality was denied or distorted. Example. He insisted it never happened, even though I remembered it clearly. I felt gaslit in that conversation. Repeat. I felt gaslit in that conversation. Phrase 78. That's a toxic dynamic. Meaning, a relationship pattern that is consistently harmful, draining, or damaging to one or both people. Context. Describing a relationship or friendship with repeated negative patterns. Example. The constant fighting followed by the intense apologies. That's a toxic dynamic. Repeat. That's a toxic dynamic. Phrase 79. I don't have room for toxic people in my life anymore. Meaning, a firm, values-based statement about the type of relationships one is willing to maintain going forward. Context. Explaining a decision to distance from or end a harmful relationship. Example. I've done a lot of work on myself, and I don't have room for toxic people in my life anymore. Repeat. I don't have room for toxic people in my life anymore. Phrase 80. That's manipulative behavior. Meaning, a specific action or pattern intended to influence someone through unfair or deceptive means. Context. Identifying a specific tactic used against the speaker. Example. Guilt tripping me into staying. That's manipulative behavior. Repeat. That's manipulative behavior. Phrase 81. I recognize the love bombing now. Meaning, retrospective identification of an intense early period of excessive affection or attention used to manipulate. Context. Reflecting on a past relationship's early stages. Example. Looking back, I recognize the love bombing now. It moved way too fast. Repeat. I recognize the love bombing now. Phrase 82. That's a form of emotional abuse. Meaning, a serious, direct classification of behavior as psychologically harmful, distinct from ordinary conflict. Context. Identifying a pattern of controlling, demeaning, or manipulative behavior in a relationship. Example. Constantly criticizing everything I do in front of others. That's a form of emotional abuse. Repeat. That's a form of emotional abuse. Phrase 83. I'm not going to tolerate that behavior anymore. Meaning, a firm, final statement rejecting a previously accepted harmful pattern. Context. Confronting a repeated issue after reaching a limit. Example. I've let this slide too many times. I'm not going to tolerate that behavior anymore. Repeat. I'm not going to tolerate that behavior anymore. Phrase 84. That's a boundary violation. Meaning, a specific, named instance of someone crossing a previously stated personal limit. Context. Formally identifying a violation, often in a serious conversation. Example. Reading my private messages was a boundary violation. Repeat. That's a boundary violation. Phrase 85. I'm not okay with being spoken to that way. Meaning, a direct, assertive rejection of disrespectful communication. Context. Responding to harsh or demeaning language in the moment. Example. I'm not okay with being spoken to that way, and I need it to stop. Repeat. I'm not okay with being spoken to that way. Phrase 86. That's DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Meaning, a specific psychological term describing a manipulation tactic where the accused denies wrongdoing, attacks the accuser, and claims victim status themselves. Context. Identifying a specific pattern during a conflict or accusation. Example. I brought up the issue, and suddenly I was the one apologizing. That's DARVO. Repeat. That's Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Phrase 87. That's a classic narcissistic pattern. Meaning, behavior associated with excessive self-focus, lack of empathy, and manipulation. Borrowed from clinical language. Context. Describing a recurring, self-centered, and manipulative behavior pattern in someone close to you. Example. Never taking responsibility and always making it about them. That's a classic narcissistic pattern. Repeat. That's a classic narcissistic pattern. Phrase 88. I'm done being your scapegoat. Meaning, a refusal to continue being unfairly blamed for problems within a family or group. Context. Addressing a long-standing family or group dynamic. Example. Every problem in this family somehow ends up being my fault. I'm done being your scapegoat. Repeat. I'm done being your scapegoat. Phrase 89. That relationship was really codependent. Meaning, a description of a relationship characterized by excessive emotional reliance between two people, often unhealthy. Context. Reflecting on a past relationship's dynamics. Example. We couldn't function without constant contact. That relationship was really codependent. Repeat. That relationship was really codependent. Phrase 90. I'm learning to trust my own perception again. Meaning, rebuilding confidence in one's own judgment and memory after a period of doubt, often following manipulation. Context. Describing recovery after a difficult relationship. Example. After everything that happened, I'm learning to trust my own perception again. Repeat. I'm learning to trust my own perception again. Phrase 91. That's a pattern of minimizing my feelings. Meaning, a recurring behavior of dismissing or downplaying the speaker's emotional experiences. Context. Identifying a specific, repeated, harmful communication pattern. Example. Every time I bring something up, you say I'm overreacting. That's a pattern of minimizing my feelings. Repeat. That's a pattern of minimizing my feelings. Phrase 92. I'm choosing myself this time. Meaning, a decision to prioritize personal well-being over maintaining a relationship or dynamic. Context. Explaining a decision to leave or distance from a difficult situation. Example. I've put everyone else first for years. I'm choosing myself this time. Repeat. I'm choosing myself this time. Phrase 93. That's not accountability. That's an excuse. Meaning, a critical distinction pointing out that an apology or explanation avoids genuine responsibility. Context. Responding to an unsatisfying apology. Example. Saying you were stressed doesn't explain the yelling. That's not accountability. That's an excuse. Repeat. That's not accountability. That's an excuse. Phrase 94. I need to see real change, not just words. Meaning, a request for demonstrated behavioral change rather than verbal promises or apologies alone. Context. Responding to repeated apologies without lasting change. Example. I've heard I'm sorry before. I need to see real change, not just words. Repeat. I need to see real change, not just words. Phrase 95. That's a pattern I'm not willing to repeat. Meaning, A firm statement recognizing a harmful cycle and refusing to continue participating in it. Context. Reflecting on repeated past relationship patterns. Example. I keep ending up in the same kind of relationship. That's a pattern I'm not willing to repeat. Repeat. That's a pattern I'm not willing to repeat. Phrase 96. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Meaning, a description of constant anxious caution to avoid upsetting an unpredictable or volatile person. Context. Describing the emotional atmosphere of a difficult relationship. Example. I never knew what would set him off. I felt like I was walking on eggshells constantly. Repeat. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Phrase 97. That's not love. That's control. Meaning, a critical reframing distinguishing genuine care from possessive or restrictive behavior. Context. Identifying controlling behavior disguised as affection or concern. Example. Checking my phone and tracking my location. That's not love. That's control. Repeat. That's not love. That's control. Phrase 98. I deserve better than that. Meaning, a statement of self-worth used to justify leaving or refusing to accept a harmful situation. Context. Reflecting on a decision to end or distance from an unhealthy relationship. Example. After thinking about it, I've realized I deserve better than that. Repeat. I deserve better than that. Phrase 99. That's a trauma response disguised as a personality trait. Meaning, a behavior mistakenly understood as simply who someone is when it's actually a learned protective reaction. Context. Reframing someone's harmful pattern with more compassion or self-awareness. Example. His need for control isn't just who he is. That's a trauma response disguised as a personality trait. Repeat. That's a trauma response disguised as a personality trait. Phrase 100. I'm no longer available for that kind of relationship. Meaning, a clear, final statement rejecting a specific unhealthy relationship pattern going forward. Context. Closing statement after ending or reflecting on a harmful dynamic. Example. I've grown a lot, and I'm no longer available for that kind of relationship. Repeat. I'm no longer available for that kind of relationship. Category 5. Self-care and energy. The language of protecting yourself. This category covers the vocabulary Americans use to describe personal recovery, rest, and self-protection, often used to explain why someone is stepping back from an obligation, a person, or an environment. Phrase 101. I'm protecting my energy. Meaning, deliberately avoiding people, situations, or activities that drain emotional resources. Context. Explaining a decision to decline or withdraw from something. Example. I'm going to skip the party. I'm really protecting my energy this week. Repeat. I'm protecting my energy. Phrase 102. That's a drain on my mental health. Meaning, a specific person, activity, or obligation is negatively affecting overall well-being. Context. Explaining why a recurring situation needs to change or end. Example. Checking social media first thing in the morning is such a drain on my mental health. Repeat. That's a drain on my mental health. Phrase 103. I'm taking a mental health day. Meaning, A deliberate day off from work or obligations, specifically to rest and recover emotionally. Context: explaining an absence from work or social plans. Example: I'm not feeling great mentally, so I'm taking a mental health day tomorrow. Repeat: I'm taking a mental health day. Phrase 104. I need to recharge. Meaning, a general need for rest and solitude to restore emotional or physical energy. Context: explaining a desire for time alone after a demanding period. Example: that was a lot of socializing this week. I really need to recharge. Repeat: I need to recharge. Phrase 105. That person is a real energy vampire. Meaning, someone whose presence consistently drains the speaker's emotional energy. Context: describing a specific person's negative effect on well-being. Example: every conversation with her leaves me exhausted. She's a real energy vampire. Repeat: that person is a real energy vampire. Phrase 106. I'm choosing peace over drama. Meaning, a deliberate decision to avoid conflict or chaotic situations in favor of calm. Context: explaining a decision to disengage from a conflict or gossip. Example: I heard what happened, but I'm choosing peace over drama this time. Repeat: I'm choosing peace over drama. Phrase 107. I need to unplug for a bit. Meaning, stepping away from digital devices, news, or communication to reduce mental overload. Context: explaining a temporary period of reduced availability or engagement. Example: I've been so overwhelmed by the news lately. I need to unplug for a bit. Repeat: I need to unplug for a bit. Phrase 108. That's not serving me anymore. Meaning, a behavior, relationship, or habit no longer contributes positively to the speaker's well-being. Context: justifying a decision to end or change a pattern. Example: I used to love that job, but it's just not serving me anymore. Repeat: that's not serving me anymore. Phrase 109. I'm in survival mode right now. Meaning, a state of managing only the most basic necessities due to overwhelming stress. Context: explaining reduced capacity for anything beyond essential tasks. Example: I know I haven't called anyone back. I've just been in survival mode right now. Repeat: I'm in survival mode right now. Phrase 110. I'm choosing rest over productivity today. Meaning, a deliberate prioritization of recovery over accomplishing tasks. Context: explaining a decision to take time off from usual responsibilities. Example: I know I have a lot to do, but I'm choosing rest over productivity today. Repeat: I'm choosing rest over productivity today. Phrase 111. I need to fill my cup. Meaning, a metaphor for restoring emotional or physical energy before continuing to give to others. Context: explaining a need for self-focused time. Example: I've given so much this week. I really need to fill my cup. Repeat: I need to fill my cup. Phrase 112. That's an act of self-preservation. Meaning, a behavior framed as necessary protection of the self, rather than selfishness. Context: justifying a decision to remove oneself from a difficult situation. Example: leaving that job wasn't giving up. It was an act of self-preservation. Repeat: That's an act of self-preservation. Phrase 113. I'm not available for negativity right now. Meaning, a refusal to engage with pessimism, complaints, or conflict at this specific time. Context: declining to participate in a negative conversation or environment. Example: I love you, but I'm not available for negativity right now. Repeat: I'm not available for negativity right now. Phrase 114. I need to check in with my body. Meaning, paying attention to physical sensations as a way of understanding emotional state. Context: pausing to assess stress, tension, or exhaustion before proceeding with something. Example: before I answer, let me check in with my body. I think I'm more stressed than I realized. Repeat: I need to check in with my body. Phrase 115. That's just not aligned with where I'm at right now. Meaning, an activity, relationship, or opportunity doesn't match the speaker's current priorities or emotional state. Context: declining something without a specific, detailed reason. Example: it sounds fun, but that's just not aligned with where I'm at right now. Repeat: that's just not aligned with where I'm at right now. Phrase 116. I'm practicing radical self-care. Meaning, an intentional, significant prioritization of personal well-being, often involving noticeable changes to routine or relationships. Context: explaining a major lifestyle shift toward prioritizing wellness. Example: I quit 3 commitments this month. I'm practicing radical self-care. Repeat: I'm practicing radical self-care. Phrase 117. I need a moment to regroup. Meaning, a brief pause to collect thoughts and emotional composure before continuing. Context: requesting a short break during a stressful conversation or task. Example: that was intense. I just need a moment to regroup. Repeat: I need a moment to regroup. Phrase 118. I'm choosing myself today. Meaning, a daily, situational decision to prioritize personal needs over external obligations. Context: explaining a decision to skip a commitment or say no to a request. Example: I know I said I'd help, but I'm choosing myself today. Repeat: I'm choosing myself today. Phrase 119. That crossed into burnout territory. Meaning, a situation has progressed from manageable stress into a state of complete exhaustion. Context: reflecting on a period of overwork or overwhelm. Example: I was fine for a while, but that really crossed into burnout territory. Repeat: that crossed into burnout territory. Phrase 120. I need to honor my limits. Meaning, respecting and acting according to one's own capacity rather than pushing past it. Context: explaining a decision to stop or decline something despite external pressure. Example: I could push through, but I need to honor my limits this time. Repeat: I need to honor my limits. Phrase 121. I'm doing a digital detox. Meaning, a deliberate, temporary break from technology and social media use. Context: explaining reduced online presence or communication. Example: I haven't posted in weeks. I'm doing a digital detox. Repeat: I'm doing a digital detox. Phrase 122. That's not my circus. not my monkeys. Meaning, an informal way of declining to get involved in someone else's chaotic problem list. Context: refusing to take responsibility for a situation that isn't yours to manage. Example: they're arguing again, but honestly, that's not my circus, not my monkeys. Repeat: that's not my circus, not my monkeys. Phrase 1, 2, 3. I'm protecting my inner peace. Meaning, deliberately avoiding conflict or negativity to preserve a calm internal state. Context: explaining a decision to disengage from a stressful situation. Example: I'm not going to respond to that message. I'm protecting my inner peace. Repeat: I'm protecting my inner peace. Phrase 124. I need to get grounded before I decide anything. Meaning, returning to a calm, centered emotional state before making an important decision. Context: delaying a decision until emotional stability is restored. Example: I'm too worked up to think clearly. I need to get grounded before I decide anything. Repeat: I need to get grounded before I decide anything. Phrase 125. I'm learning that rest is productive too. Meaning, a reframing of relaxation as valuable rather than wasted or lazy time. Context: justifying taking a break without guilt. Example: I used to feel guilty for resting. I'm learning that rest is productive too. Repeat: I'm learning that rest is productive too. Category 6, doing the work. Growth, accountability, and self-improvement. The final piece of Therapy Speak vocabulary is about ongoing personal growth, the language Americans use to describe self-improvement, taking responsibility, and the effort of becoming a better version of themselves. Phrase 126. I'm doing the work. Meaning, actively engaged in personal growth, often through therapy, reflection, or intentional behavior change. Context: explaining ongoing efforts towards self-improvement. Example: I know I used to react badly to criticism, but I'm doing the work on that. Repeat: I'm doing the work. Phrase 127. I take full accountability for that. Meaning, a complete, unqualified acceptance of responsibility for one's own actions. Context: owning a mistake without minimizing or deflecting blame. Example: I shouldn't have said that. I take full accountability for that. Repeat: I take full accountability for that. Phrase 128. I'm unlearning some old patterns. Meaning, actively working to change deeply ingrained, often harmful behaviors or beliefs. Context: describing personal growth focused on reversing habitual reactions. Example: I grew up thinking anger was dangerous to express. I'm unlearning some old patterns. Repeat: I'm unlearning some old patterns. Phrase 129. I'm showing up differently now. Meaning, demonstrating consistent, changed behavior as evidence of personal growth. Context: describing visible improvement in how one behaves in relationships or situations. Example: I know I let you down before, but I'm showing up differently now. Repeat: I'm showing up differently now. Phrase 130. That's growth. Meaning, a brief, affirming acknowledgement that a behavior or reaction represents genuine positive change. Context. Recognizing improvement, either in yourself or someone else. Example. I didn't yell, I just walked away and calmed down first. That's growth. Repeat. That's growth. Phrase 131. I'm sitting with my part in this. Meaning, reflecting specifically on one's own contribution to a conflict or problem, rather than focusing on others' faults. Context. Taking personal responsibility during or after a disagreement. Example. Before I respond, I'm sitting with my part in this. Repeat. I'm sitting with my part in this. Phrase 132. I'm choosing accountability over defensiveness. Meaning, a deliberate decision to accept responsibility rather than react protectively when confronted. Context. Responding to feedback or criticism without becoming defensive. Example. My first instinct was to argue, but I'm choosing accountability over defensiveness. Repeat. I'm choosing accountability over defensiveness. Phrase 133. I'm doing my own inner work. Meaning, personal, internal growth focused on self-understanding rather than changing external circumstances. Context. Explaining a period of reflection or therapy-driven self-examination. Example. I haven't been very social lately. I'm doing my own inner work right now. Repeat. I'm doing my own inner work. Phrase 134. That's not growth, that's performance. Meaning, a critical distinction pointing out that apparent self-improvement is superficial or insincere. Context. Doubting the authenticity of someone's claimed personal change. Example. You only apologize when other people are watching. That's not growth, that's performance. Repeat. That's not growth, that's performance. Phrase 135. I'm holding myself accountable. Meaning, self-monitoring and taking personal responsibility for behavior without needing external enforcement. Context. Describing self-directed effort to maintain positive change. Example. I've been tracking my reactions all week. I'm holding myself accountable. Repeat. I'm holding myself accountable. Phrase 136. I'm in a season of healing. Meaning, a defined period of life focused primarily on emotional recovery and self-repair. Context. Explaining reduced availability or changed priorities during a difficult time. Example. I know I've been quieter lately. I'm just in a season of healing. Repeat. I'm in a season of healing. Phrase 137. I need to own my mistakes without spiraling into shame. Meaning, a balanced approach to accountability that avoids both denial and excessive self-punishment. Context. Describing a healthy response to personal error. Example. I said something hurtful, and I need to own my mistakes without spiraling into shame. Repeat. I need to own my mistakes without spiraling into shame. Phrase 138. That's the old me, not who I am now. Meaning, a statement distancing current identity from past harmful behavior, emphasizing change over time. Context. Explaining that a past incident no longer reflects who the speaker has become. Example. I used to be really controlling in relationships. That's the old me, not who I am now. Repeat. That's the old me, not who I am now. Phrase 139. I'm doing the work in therapy. Meaning, explicitly attributing personal growth to formal therapeutic support. Context. Explaining the source of recent behavioral or emotional changes. Example. I've noticed I react less defensively now. I'm doing the work in therapy. Repeat. I'm doing the work in therapy. Phrase 140. I want to model healthier behavior. Meaning, a conscious effort to demonstrate positive patterns, often for the benefit of others, like children or partners. Context. Explaining motivation behind a deliberate behavior change. Example. I don't want my kids to grow up avoiding conflict. I want to model healthier behavior. Repeat. I want to model healthier behavior. Phrase 141. That's a growth edge for me. Meaning, a specific area identified as challenging but important for continued personal development. Context. Naming a particular weakness or area of ongoing self-improvement. Example. Receiving feedback without getting defensive. That's a growth edge for me. Repeat. That's a growth edge for me. Phrase 142. I'm proud of the progress I've made. Meaning, genuine self-acknowledgement of positive change over time. Context. Reflecting positively on personal development. Example. A year ago, I couldn't have had this conversation calmly. I'm proud of the progress I've made. Repeat. I'm proud of the progress I've made. Phrase 143. I need to repair this, not just apologize. Meaning, a commitment to taking concrete action to address harm, beyond simply saying sorry. Context. Responding to a conflict with a plan for meaningful change. Example. I know sorry isn't enough. I need to repair this, not just apologize. Repeat. I need to repair this, not just apologize. Phrase 144. I'm learning to regulate instead of react. Meaning, developing the ability to manage emotional responses calmly rather than acting impulsively. Context. Describing progress in emotional self-control. Example. I used to slam doors when I was upset. I'm learning to regulate instead of react. Repeat. I'm learning to regulate instead of react. Phrase 145. That's a pattern I'm actively breaking. Meaning, a specific named cycle of behavior that the speaker is deliberately working to change. Context. Naming a recognized personal pattern and the effort to change it. Example. Avoiding hard conversations. That's a pattern I'm actively breaking. Repeat. That's a pattern I'm actively breaking. Phrase 146. I want to be accountable without being self-punishing. Meaning, a balanced approach to owning mistakes that avoids excessive guilt or self-criticism. Context: describing a healthier relationship with personal responsibility. Example: I'm trying to say sorry and move forward. I want to be accountable without being self-punishing. Repeat: I want to be accountable without being self-punishing. Phrase 147. I'm learning to give myself grace. Meaning: practicing self-compassion, particularly around mistakes or imperfections. Context: responding to a personal setback with kindness rather than harsh self-judgment. Example: I missed the deadline, but I'm learning to give myself grace instead of spiraling. Repeat: I'm learning to give myself grace. Phrase 148. That's part of my healing journey. Meaning: a specific experience or decision framed as one step within a broader, ongoing process of personal recovery. Context: contextualizing a significant life decision or change. Example: leaving that job was really hard, but it's part of my healing journey. Repeat: that's part of my healing journey. Phrase 149. I'm committed to becoming a better version of myself. Meaning: a general, ongoing statement of intention toward continued self-improvement. Context: expressing long-term personal growth goals. Example: this year has been about facing hard truths. I'm committed to becoming a better version of myself. Repeat: I'm committed to becoming a better version of myself. Phrase 150. I did the work and I can feel the difference. Meaning: a confident, retrospective statement affirming that personal growth efforts have produced real, felt change. Context: reflecting on completed or ongoing self-improvement with visible results. Example: I used to panic in situations like this. Now I stay calm. I did the work and I can feel the difference. Repeat: I did the work and I can feel the difference. Closing: 150 phrases, 6 categories, and you have just decoded one of the fastest moving vocabulary shifts in modern American English. The complete migration of therapy language from the clinical world into everyday text messages, arguments, breakups, workplaces, and family dinners. You now understand what it really means when an American says they're protecting their energy, why that's a boundary ends an argument instantly, and how I'm doing the work can be either a genuine act of growth or, sometimes, a very polished way of avoiding a direct apology. This vocabulary is not neutral. It carries real cultural weight, real emotional stakes, and sometimes real manipulation of its own.